I'm Dennis Burns. I am a county agent in Northeast Louisiana. I'm A&R on Tensas, Catahoula, Concordia Parish in the south, kind of like along the river in the south part of what we call the Delta along in Louisiana. And I also do GIS for the Ag Center. Dr. Josh Copes is agronomist, weed scientist at the Northeast Research Station. And we're going to talk together. We're going to talk about row rice today in Louisiana. Row rice is a very good crop, and it's for us, it's become more than good. It's become great. In 2015, we had 75 acres in Tensas Parish. One grower, a pair of two brothers, had 75 acres to try. They liked it. In 2018, we had 6,000. 3,000 of that was in Tensas, Catahoula, Concordia. 2019, we had 15,500. There was a lot up in Morehouse. We actually were down a little bit in our area because of rotations. And it's a very good, and let me say this before I get too far into this. In my case, most of the soils I deal with are heavy clay, heavy, sharky, alligator clays. That's what we raise rice on. You get up in Morehouse, you get over on Franklin, some of the other Richland, they're more of a perry clays, got some silt loams in them. They'll be more of a silty clay loam. We're on heavy clays, and all my talks will my points will pretty much go towards that because that's what I'm best with. In 2018, we started through the Louisiana Rice Research Board. We got there was a grant given. I'm actually a cooperator on it, but to begin to establish BMPs for row rice in Louisiana. And that because it was all over the board a little bit. I mean, in everything you read, the Delta Farm Press, people are doing it different ways and looking at different things. And so we said, well, let's see if we can standardize something. I don't know we did, other than in 2 years, we've drawn some general conclusions. You got to rotate. You have to rotate. If you don't, weeds will take you over. And I can tell you that I've had it on the station for several years, a small plot we were playing with, had it for several years. Grass will take you, you can't control the grass. The first year was tea weeds and tie vine, morning glories, prickly cider and morning glories. Second year was grass. And with Josh was helping with the weed stuff, we threw everything at it. We lost plots because couldn't control the grass. But you have to rotate. You pick up something, soybeans is by far the best. We've grown it behind cotton, we've grown it behind corn. Soybeans are by far the best. You pick up a little residual nitrogen out of them. Usually if you can get in there and you get it planted or you get it harvested and you don't have any ruts, you just come back and plant it again with the rice. Works great. Minimal row height. And a lot of that has to do with, the minimal row height has to do with planters. With the drills, you get uneven planting depth and all that. So you want minimum row height. And when I say minimum, I'm talking about literally. In some cases, there's a grower in Franklin who uses a roller with he's got some angle iron he's working on, and he actually rolls it, and it makes a V-shaped thing about 6 inches deep, about 6 inches wide. One of my growers, probably one of the best fields he had this year, was planted flat. He was planted flat, and he actually took his furrow plow and plowed every 76 inches a little furrow. And I don't know what the yield was. I can tell you, but looking at the field, it was by far the best looking field he had all year. The emergence was great. Everything was good. The row width depends on soil type. If you're on a heavy clay like we are, we go anywhere from 60 to 80 inches, a wide bed. If you get over on more of the silt loams, you're going to go 30s to 36s, 38s. You're going to go single beds. Don't hold water. This is a big deal. For us, most of our guys don't hold water. It's not really needed on the heavy clays. We can manage it evenly. You may want to come in when it starts heading and hold some water on the bottom end, just because heading is critical time for water. So that's something you have to think about yourself. But we do just as well treating it. And I guess the guys that started, their idea was, it's just another crop for us. It's an irrigated crop. And so we're just going to treat it like cotton, corn, soybeans. We're just going to water it and do the same thing. And we're going to manage our water like that. And it's worked well on the heavy clays. Now, I understand you get on some of the silty clay loams, the silt loams, it's different. You got to do something different. But it works. And, you know, as I've said before, you know, the number one reason for holding water in rice is weed control. We're spending a lot of money in putting out residuals to hold it and all that, to not keep weeds out. You know, water doesn't factor into weed control. The other thing is, we learned this from year one, split nitrogen applications. Everybody does it a little bit different, has a little different goal, but you're going to split them. Otherwise, you're going to lose nitrogen. Either your rice is not going to be able to take it up, or you're going to lose it through denitrification. The crop rotation, as I've already talked a little bit about that, weed control is number one thing. You'll see, I know 2 years ago, I didn't see it so much this year. I did see some prickly side in the field this year. 2 years ago, in one field, we saw Johnson grass. This was beans. There was no Johnson grass in the field. The year before, they sprayed it with Roundup. It's clean, but there was a power line went through the field. Around every power line was Johnson grass. Well, by the end of the year with the rice, he had clumps of Johnson grass scattered everywhere. Didn't affect his yield, but you knew it was there. It's another one of those things that shows up. Pigweed. We have Roundup resistant pigweed. Pigweed is a major thing for us. We use residuals to control it, but it will show up. So you want to make sure that if you're going, you know, pigweed goes to seed, produces 500,000 to 1 million seed, carries over, they stay there for years, you're going to deal with them. And when you don't have it flooded, it's going to be a problem. So you got to have the residuals out there. But you can rotate your herbicides. No-till after the previous crop. And I put that because we've seen our best results, our best stands, where it comes after soybeans. And their soybeans maybe had combine tracks, that's about it. And they came in, they burned it down and planted it. We got a good stand, everything worked well. The furrows between the rows are mashed down, they're weathered, the rows aren't very tall, and the water flows. That's been our best observation of field conditions as going into it. The row height and the width, just tall enough to direct the water down the furrow. That's all you want. And and here again, I'm talking about on our clay soils. Water goes sideways about as fast as it goes down the road. It moves through there. And if it doesn't have to percolate up anywhere, it just goes sideways. And I know from the very first, I've walked out there on 76-inch beds, and water's running down the furrows, and the top of the bed, which, like I said, is only about 1 inch tall, is crusted over. There's a crust. But if you flip that crust over, you can see water running underneath. It does that. You know, it does, and you figure it like that when you get started. You get your setup, and I'll throw this in. Well, I'll wait a minute to talk about pipe planter, but here again, silt loam, you're looking at single rows. Even though they're still shallow, you're small, you're still looking at single rows because you're going to need the water because it will crust over on you, and you need to be able to get that water in there. I can tell you, if you don't get the water, you won't make the rice. The heavy clays, the wide beds works, and after last year and some of the other stuff we're kind of looking at, and we'll look at this year, planting flat and running a furrow seems to be a very good way to go. Or even running your furrow in the fall and then coming back and just planting in the spring. Either way, that seems to be a good way. We did learn, I had a grower 2 years ago, and we've done some more since then. Planting at a slight angle helps, because you take a drill, you take a 40-foot drill, it doesn't necessarily match up to your rows. And so when you turn around, you get it set and you turn around, you're off a little bit. So now where you were planting on top of a row, you're now planting in the furrow, or in the, and that it just doesn't. You got stuff that's going too deep, stuff that's too shallow. By going at about a 20-degree angle, just kind of angling across there a little bit, you don't tear your rows down, and it plants much more uniformly. You get it set, and it just does better. Comes up more uniform, which in row rice, you want a uniform stand. You want it all come up together, you want to manage it together. Keep it going like that, keep it together. But that having just that furrow to direct the water. I mean, we're basically flat ground with a furrow. It means rice likes water, we're holding water on some of it. You just want it, you got to get the water out there, but you don't need a big bed. Most of what we've seen, problems we've seen with stand occurs because of tall beds. It just does. Hold water, don't hold water. You know, silt loam soils, you got to hold water. They just don't do well without it. Irrigation capacity is limited. If you're trying to stretch it, your irrigation capacity, you can hold water, takes less time to run, your irrigation. But if you hold water, you have 3 separate management zones. And I can tell you, and I'll show you a yield map in a minute from one that does. And it's, the 3 zones are defined. They're easy to see. We went out, we marked them, you know, we can mark them where the water is. And you can see, and there is some yield difference. But that's 3 zones you got to manage it. And it also affects how your nitrogen goes out. You know, how you put it out, all that, the timing of it. Don't hold water, you treat it the same. Our heavy clay soils, I'll give you, there may be a yield difference where we do and don't on some soils. I'll show you a map in a minute that there is no, you know, across the board, it's just as good. But let me go back and say, these are on heavy clay soils. And I know a lot of it's grown on silty clay loams, silty clay, or sandy, silt loams. It's different. We're a little bit different down there. We don't grow any, I don't really know any rice that's grown on silt loam or silty clay loam. It's all on heavy soils. Most of the silt loam soils for us is cotton, corn, or soybeans. So, nitrogen applications. Now this has kind of evolved since we started in 2015. You need a starter. Our guys put ammonia sulfate. As soon as that rice comes up, you just get a stand, you fly on ammonia sulfate or use a buggy, whatever you want to do. Get it out there. If you fly it on, airplanes in our area charge 8 cents a pound or $8 an acre. So everybody, if you don't fly something on, it goes out 100 pounds. Either 100 pounds of urea, 100 pounds of ammonia sulfate. They say it's just cheaper to do it like that. I mean, it's $8 and they just get it out there. With ammonia sulfate, you'll get 26 pounds of sulfur, which is probably more than you need. And you get 21 pounds of nitrogen. If you've put out DAP or something pre-plant as a mixed fertilizer, you may have 15 to 20 units of that out there, and it's going to use it. You put it out there, you catch, hopefully with ammonia sulfate, with that application, that time of year we're getting pretty frequent showers, and within a few days, if you don't, you need to flush it, incorporate it, but we get a shower or something that incorporates it. But you need it. You need that rice growing fast. And that little bit of nitrogen, 20 units, it'll use most of it. It's not like in starter and flooded rice, sometimes it doesn't. The roots don't use it as much, but it does in this. It takes it up and you can see it growing. Early to mid tiller, you're going to split it 2 to 3 times a week apart. Kind of depends on what rate you want to go. Some people go a much higher rate on certain soil types. Generally, we'll go 2 to, kind of depends on what was out there. If there were soybeans out there, we figure we're getting a little carryover. If there's corn out there, we're getting a bunch of carryover. We can see it. You can see those green strips going through the field behind corn. But it just depends on what you're looking at, what your preference is. But you want to split it about a week apart, 10 days max. Get it out there, get that absorbed. You're going to flush it. Either you're going to get a rain immediately after, or you're going to want to flush it. Incorporate that fertilizer and use a urease inhibitor. Get it in there. And this goes same thing with, if you do 2 shots, you may want to come back at green ring, panicle initiation. If you do 3, a lot of times that 3rd shot kind of overlaps close enough. With the hybrids, everybody pretty much goes with a boot stage application. And here again, on all this, if it's going out with an airplane, it's going out 100 pounds of urea. So you're looking at 46 pounds. So if you do 2, that's 92 pounds. If you do 3, it's 134 pounds. and then you add another one to it. And some of them will go green ring, some of them will go, and they'll do an additional one. It's kind of whatever you want to do. Nobody does it exactly the same, but it's kind of, it's funny the way it is. And some of it depends on soil type and rotation crops, but it does pick up a little bit different. Weed control, number one thing, start clean. Burn it down. Burn it down, 6 weeks at a time. Clean it up. You don't want anything alive. When you go in, right after you plant it, if you're going to put out, most everybody puts out Command first. If you're going to put Command out, add some Roundup to it, add some Gramoxone to it, depending on what you got out there for weeds. A lot of times there may be a little bit of grass coming up, so you put the Roundup. You want it clean, and you want that residual out there. And it's a pre-emerge with a residual, like Command. The first post-emerge application that goes out needs to go out well before your first residual, before your pre-emerge runs out. It needs to go out then. You need to be ahead of it. You cannot let it go out and say, well, look at there, I got some grass coming up, my Command's running out, I need to come back with something else. No, you go it out ahead of time. You got to be proactive. You do not want the weeds coming up. The only way to keep them from coming up is have a residual there. And some of them will do prowl, they'll do facet. Some of them use both. Depends on what your weed spectrum is and what you think you need. Your best weed control is vigorous rice growth. That's where that starter comes in, and when you put out your tillering, you want that rice growing as fast as it'll grow. And as I said, normally and during that time of year, we're looking at enough showers to keep it growing good, keep it growing. If we have to, we can flush if it turns off dry. And if you put out a residual with that post-application, a lot of times we'll flush it to incorporate it, get it in the ground. And with that post-emerge application, there's usually stam or something else that if there is anything coming up, it'll take it out. And I mentioned terrestrial weeds. I've mentioned that several times. They show up. They're there. They're just waiting for you not to have water. And they can be a problem. But just pay attention to them. Disease control, blast is the number one thing. By row rice, the production method just promotes blast. You're going to want to look at a hybrid that has resistance. There are some, I think some of the Clearfield, one of them or two of them have pretty good resistance, or you can check it and spray for it. But I can tell you, just plant the hybrid, go ahead and get that resistance out there because it's easier. And that's not full resistance, that's just tolerance, But the other diseases, pretty much the same. There's not a lot of difference. Insect control, seed treatment. If you hold water, you're going to have rice water weevils on the low end. More than likely. If your terrestrial insects become more of a problem, grape colaspis, chinch bugs, some cases maybe even thrips. People talk a little bit about thrips. You're going to have those problems. It'll be different. So a seed treatment is unique. Bill bugs. Bill bugs showed up, or we started talking about them last year, and we had them at the Northeast Research Station where my office is and Josh is stationed. And R.L. Frazier, county agent in Madison, we're all on a project that he's going to talk about, and bill bugs showed up. I mean, they were like, we had no idea, and all of a sudden went out there and there's white heads out there. It was just coming out. And we were pulling up plants and finding 2 or 3 larvae under them. I mean, it wasn't just 1 or 2. And looking back on it, I saw bill bugs in a commercial field the year before, in 2018. I just thought they were borers or something, because it was just a scattered plant here, there, and yonder. And I just assumed it was borers, even though I knew what seed treatments they put out. I said, well, that didn't get enough or something. Just kind of didn't even think about it. And I think now, looking back on it, probably was bill bugs. But, other insect pressures the same. Stink bugs, rice stink bugs, all that. Armyworms, you're going to have all that, and you're going to treat them the same. Irrigation management. And this is the big deal. Talk about saving water. The 2-year average for the BMP trial we're using is 24.5 acre inches, 5.2 days frequency. That's over the whole year. I can tell you in 2018, we didn't roll pipe out on the field in Tensall until July 1st. Now, and now, in the month of July, we put 18 inches up, or more, a little more than that, because it was dry and it was heady. It's critical during reproduction. You got to keep the ground wet. And we've used pipe planter on several fields, and we use a 1 to 1.5 acre inch instead of 3, because basically you're flushing it. You're not going to let it get dry out below 6 inches. We use a volumetric sensor. The first year we use watermarks. Don't use watermarks. And on clay soil, it dry. Everybody in here that farms clay soil knows the day after it rains, it starts cracking. I mean, it just cracks. And so we look at it. Now, it won't crack that fast initially. It'll keep on going down. But we use a volumetric of decagons, put them at the 5-inch level, and we triggered off it. We triggered at 60% on the decagons. As we got closer towards heading, when heading started coming out, we lowered that trigger to about 50. So we started going out every 3 days. But we looked at it very close and watched it. Rooting depth. We have dug roots up and seen from the sensors we're looking at 8 to 10 inch roots. I mean, they're 8 inches all over the place. You can find them, but you start digging. And we actually looked at some stuff where we saw them at 12 inch on some of the sensor stuff. Variety trials, hybrids, and this was one that's part of the BMP. It's an on-farm variety trial. 200 bushels on the hybrid, 156 on the conventional. The average, hybrids cost more, $619 versus $522. Most of it has to do with seed cost. Monitoring. These are, you see the monitor out in the field. And then you'll see this is a graph that comes from it. We let it get too dry one time. That's actually an average of the 5 and the 8 inch sensors. We had them down to 12 inches. And the biggest thing I want you to see in here is you'll see on that, it's kind of hard to see, but there's 2 green strips on each side of that field. Nitrogen reference strips. If you grow row rice, you have to monitor your nitrogen. Put out a 2x rate or something on those strips on the end. Pay attention to it. Either you go out there with a handheld green seeker, check it, or just look at it and say, this is dark green, mine's not so dark green, I need more nitrogen. That's the money, that's the best money you can spend. Just a couple of quick maps here. On the left, we didn't retain water, cut 239, you see it's pretty uniform. On the right, it's 235, they held water, and you can see there's about a 9 bushel difference in yield. You know, pretty straightforward, different soil types. So, any questions? I probably went a little long, Josh. Anybody got a question? Yes, sir.
What were the net returns on the fields that had low rise when compared to the furrow when compared to the flooded fields? Comparative studies?
Darren, we don't have a comparative study on it, but I can tell you right now, everybody in pretty much in RL's parishes and mine, they're not raising paddy rice. Only paddy rice they raise is 0 grade. Unless they've got a field that, because of the way it waters or something, they have to have a levee. They'll tell you right now, no, I'm not going back to a levee plow. Putting in gates? Mm-mm. For one thing, they're picking up extra ground. You know, you take the levees out and you're picking up that much ground you're farming. You know, a lot of them they'll plant it, then they pull the levees, they wasted that seed. And then you got to put the gates in, you got to take the gates out. Even cutting it, you can cut down the row instead of cutting across between paddies, it drains. I can tell you right now, when you pull, even in the fields that are flooded, when you pull that bottom board, when that rice is ready, you're ready, you pull the water, it dries up very quickly, much faster than a paddy rice field. So, but that we haven't done any economic differences. So, anybody else? All right.
What's the farthest distance-wise down furrow that you're comfortable with?
Most of ours 1,000 foot, which is normal. For us, we try and keep water, furrow irrigated water. We don't want to go over 1,200 feet. Most times we'll run 1,000. That's what we try for. You know, that's most of our land is.
Over 4 mile rows.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
No. Well, you can. It depends on the water you got. Rice is different because you're going to flush. You're flushing rice. You're not watering. It's not like you're putting 3 inches on corn. You're flushing rice. So water goes down pretty fast. So you could probably, if you got enough well, generally what I'll say is, if you got enough well capacity to water a field in 24 hours, you can figure that field's going to water in 12 hours. Just rule of thumb.
Rice will water a lot faster.
Rice waters a lot faster.
Even though you're watering every 5 days, that's what we do corn. It's
Yeah,
gonna
it's-
maintain the moisture, it's gonna water faster.
It'll water faster. And if you, I'm sorry?
You're saying half the time.
Yeah.
So our-
Just rule of thumb, if you got, say you've got 240-acre fields on a well, and this well, it's a two-day process to water corn, you probably water it all in one day with rice. We've just seen, because you're just flushing it. You're only refilling 5 inches, or 4 inches in some cases. You know, so you're just flushing it across. You'll be surprised how fast it runs across. Even rice that's big and, you know, you're slowing it down some because it's all in the furrows, it just goes across. Works well. Helps with the nitrogen because you get it across so fast. But normally our fields, when our fields are set up, most everybody is 1,000 feet. That's what they shoot for
You
irrigation.
pump levees in the bottom, hold water in the bottom of it all, or you just,
Most of ours fields that are set up, in the last few years when we've been leveling, we go to a single water furrow at the bottom and then it goes up to a pad. And so there's a culvert in there and just stop the culvert up. Some of them will back up halfway the field, some of them back up a quarter of the way. Depends on how flat the field is, what the grade is. Most of ours will be from 1/10 to 1/10.5 if it's level.
Are you managing the water depth on the bottom?
Yeah, they don't want to get too deep. And some of them put boards in, they'll put a board in at first, and then as they water, they bring it up. They just kind of keep going, but they don't want it to get too deep. But I don't know, I go back and forth. And I will say now, we did on where we don't hold water, we will pump probably 4 or 5 more acre inches, but you're not talking about a lot of money. And it does give a uniform field, which helps on the fertilizer because we're not flying fertilizer at boot stage into the water. So